The grand chamber of the interstellar coalition shimmered with polished alloy and crystalline light, a place where the galaxy's most advanced civilizations gathered to parade their might. Rows of alien delegates filled the observation tiers, their colors and shapes a living catalog of evolutionary variety. At the center, an elevated platform displayed the latest marvels of weaponry: sleek plasma casters, gravity slings, and silent antimatter rifles, each introduced with reverent pride by their creators. The air smelled faintly of ozone, burned circuitry, and ambition. Captain Marcus Hale stood with arms folded, a silent sentinel among his squad of Earth Marines. Their weapons, cased in dark alloy and worn from service, looked almost crude against the gleaming alien arsenal. Marcus's face betrayed nothing, though his men shifted uneasily under the stares and murmurs. He had heard it before, the whispers of backward technology, of barbaric traditions that clung to bullets and propellants instead of pure energy streams. Yet here he remained, representing a species still climbing from its cradle, stubbornly refusing to trade steel and powder for humming beams of light. General Threxer of the Karvek Dominion took the stage, his broad scales shimmering with an oily sheen, his chest ridged like carved stone. He gestured to a plasma cannon mounted on a tripod, a weapon that released a faint glow as though caged lightning simmered within. "Observe true mastery," Threxer proclaimed, his voice reverberating with guttural resonance. "Precision without waste. Our plasma is pure, our aim flawless. No recoil, no instability, no primitive clamor." He activated the cannon, and a silent lance of heat struck a target dummy across the chamber. The figure disintegrated into vapor. The delegates hissed and clicked in approval. Next, Commander Ruln, an insectoid strategist whose many limbs twitched with restless calculation, demonstrated a swarm rifle. Thousands of microprojectiles of energized chitin shot forward like a cloud, reducing a target to slivers. "No waste of physics," he said through a translator device, his compound eyes reflecting the crowd's applause. Then the human turn arrived. A single crate was dragged forward. Inside rested not a weapon of shimmering light, but rifles of dark steel, magazines loaded with blunt, lethal promise. Marcus stepped onto the platform. His movements were precise, unhurried, like a soldier long accustomed to scrutiny. He lifted the weapon, chambered around, and took aim at the fresh target across the chamber. The crack of the rifle shattered the sterile air. The weapon recoiled hard against his shoulder, muzzle flashing, echo rolling through the chamber with violent thunder. The target exploded into shards, torn apart not by heat or exotic radiation, but by sheer kinetic savagery. A second shot followed, louder than the first. Alien eyes blinked, pupils dilated, antennae quivered at the sound. A chorus of disbelief filled the chamber. General Threxer barked a guttural laugh that echoed off the high walls. "Your weapons strike you back," he boomed, his sharp teeth glinting. "You bruise yourselves for the privilege of firing? Such waste, such clumsy brutality. What you call arms are toys of the unrefined." Others joined in, chuckles, hisses, and trills of mockery spreading like wildfire through the tiers. Marcus lowered the rifle with calm precision, locked the safety, and set it back into the crate. His gaze met Threxer's, unflinching. His voice carried, steady and grounded, not raised to compete with laughter, but somehow cutting through it. "Physics has a price. You cannot cheat momentum. Our weapons remind us of it. Every time we fire, we feel the cost, and we aim knowing the burden is ours to bear." For a moment, silence threatened to return, but Threxer dismissed it with another booming laugh, shaking his massive head. "Spoken like a species too frail to escape its own gravity wells without breaking bones. Your burden is weakness, nothing more." Marcus didn't argue. He simply stood, hands behind his back, face unreadable, while his men remained at rigid attention. He had not come to win approval in words. He knew time would reveal what mockery could not hide, that recoil was not weakness, but a measure of force unleashed, of power channeled and endured. Commander Ruln's many eyes lingered longer than the others. He tilted his head, insectal mandibles clicking softly. There was no laughter in his expression, only a spark of something else. Curiosity, perhaps even unease. He said nothing, but his silence was louder than the jeers of the crowd. The session continued, alien factions boasting of advancements, cataloging specifications, and promising that no foe could withstand their elegance. Marcus and his men stood quietly, dismissed by many as irrelevant, an echo of a primitive era. Yet beneath the polished theater of superiority, a tension began to simmer. Beyond the walls of the summit, the galaxy was far from safe. Borders shifted, warbands prowled, and hostile empires hungered for weakness. The delegates who laughed the loudest had known defeat before, though they tried to bury the memory under arrogance. Marcus had fought wars on mud, ice, and ash, where no theory shielded soldiers from the weight of physics. He knew arrogance was armor thinner than paper when battle truly began. When the summit closed for the day, the laughter still lingered. Aliens filed out, shaking heads at the thought of weapons that punished their wielders. General Threxer sneered as he passed Marcus, towering above him. "Keep your toys polished, human. Perhaps we'll hang them in a museum one day, a reminder of your quaint barbarism." Marcus offered no reply. His eyes followed the general until he was gone, then shifted to his men. "Stay sharp," he said quietly. "Mockery is cheap. Reality never is." The Marines nodded, their faces set in grim determination. Their weapons were heavy, their shoulders already bearing the marks of training, but each carried them with pride. They had nothing to prove in words. Proof, Marcus knew, would come when laughter ended and survival began. That night, as the delegates rested in their chambers, shadows stirred at the edges of the system. A silent fleet approached, cloaked in darkness, hungering for conquest. The coalition would learn, sooner than they imagined, the true measure of recoil. The alarms pierced the stillness of the coalition station like a blade through silk. Red warning lights flickered along the vaulted ceilings, turning polished metal into a throbbing sea of crimson. Delegates spilled from their quarters, their dignified composure shattered, antennae twitching, scales flaring, mandibles clacking in fearful cadence. Above the chaos, a booming voice filled the comm system. "Unidentified fleet detected. Hostile signatures confirmed. Brace for imminent contact." Marcus Hale moved with the measured urgency of a man who had heard alarms too many times to panic. His squad fell into formation around him, rifles slung but ready, boots striking the floor in a steady rhythm that cut through the frantic scurrying of alien dignitaries. He did not ask questions, he already knew the answer. The shadows he had felt stirring were now upon them. General Threxer stormed past, his scaled bulk bristling with anger rather than fear. "XYRKL," he snarled, voice vibrating with loathing. "Raiders. Scavengers. Parasites who spread like a plague." He turned to Marcus with a sneer, even in the face of danger unwilling to soften. "Stay clear, human. This is a war for real weapons." Marcus gave no reply. His silence was a soldier's restraint, though his hand lingered near his rifle, as though it could already taste battle. The first strike came without warning. The station shuddered as claws of living metal tore through the outer hull. The XYRKL breached in a storm of screeches and hissing vapor, their bodies grotesque fusions of sinew and steel, eyes glowing with a predatory hunger. Their armor was alive, a chitinous carapace that oozed and hardened with every blow it endured. The alien guards met them with energy rifles, firing beams of light that sizzled across the invaders' forms. The chamber filled with dazzling streaks of color and the acrid scent of vaporized air. But the beams, for all their brilliance, failed to stop the charge. The XYRKL advanced unfazed, their armor knitting itself against the precise burns. Plasma lances carved glowing scars, but did not slow the momentum of living metal and fury. The defenders fell back, disbelief on their faces, as their prideful weapons proved inadequate. Threxer roared orders, his plasma cannon pulsing with furious blasts. Each shot struck with surgical precision, cutting through an enemy only for the wound to close moments later. The general's bellowing confidence faltered as the tide pressed closer. "Hold your ground," he demanded, but his soldiers hesitated, their faith in their armaments unraveling with every regenerating foe. It was then that Marcus stepped forward. His hand snapped up, signaling his men. The Marines moved as one. Rifles lifted, magazines locked, safety catches flicked with the crispness of ritual. The first crack of gunfire thundered like a storm through the hall, shocking the coalition soldiers who had never heard such primal noise. Bullets tore into XYRKL flesh, shattering armor with brutal insistence. Where beams had scorched, steel projectiles gouged. Where plasma had seared surface wounds, slugs punched gaping holes that refused to close. The XYRKL shrieked, their momentum stalling for the first time. Chitin splintered under repeated volleys, ichor spraying the deck in dark arcs. The recoil slammed against human shoulders, each shot a reminder of force exchanged, but none faltered. They rode the kick, absorbed it, and sent more rounds downrange with mechanical discipline. Alien eyes widened. Commander Ruln, perched along the wall with his angular limbs twitching, leaned forward, his mandibles clicking softly. His voice, filtered through the translator, held a note of fascination. Kinetic trauma, they disrupt regeneration. Crude, but effective. Threxer snarled as though unwilling to admit what his eyes confirmed. His plasma cannon discharged another brilliant stream, yet he could not ignore that it was the thunderous roar of ballistic fire that carved a path through the enemy line. Marcus's voice cut through the din, sharp and steady. Target joints. Suppressive fire on the flanks. Don't waste a shot. His commands were not shouted, but every Marine heard and obeyed, their weapons speaking louder than any cry. The formation tightened, the storm of gunfire shaping the battlefield into something the XYRKL had never known, resistance that bit deeper the harder they pressed. The coalition troops, stunned into inaction, began to recover under the cover the Marines provided. They watched as humans bore the recoil of each shot, shoulders jerking, muzzles flashing, yet no hesitation marred their rhythm. Smoke curled through the chamber, the scent of cordite alien to most who breathed it, but unforgettable in its promise of destruction. A XYRKL warrior surged forward, towering over Marcus, claws extended. The captain sidestepped with a soldier's grace, brought his rifle to bear, and emptied 3 rounds into its chest. Each impact drove the creature backward, armor cracking, ichor spraying until it collapsed in a shuddering heap. Marcus adjusted his stance, rolled his shoulder against the ache of recoil, and scanned for the next target. There was no celebration, no wasted movement, only the relentless application of force. For the first time, silence spread among the coalition observers. Their jeers and mockery had evaporated, replaced by the realization that their elegant weapons had failed where human brutality thrived. Threxer's eyes narrowed, the edges of arrogance crumbling as he watched a single squad of Marines achieve what an entire guard battalion could not. The XYRKL fell back, their first wave broken, dragging wounded husks of their own from the battlefield. Smoke hung in the air, mingling with the acrid scent of blood and burnt ozone. The floor was littered with shattered carapace and twisted remnants of biomechanical armor, punctured in places so wide and raw that even the coalition generals could not deny the evidence. Marcus lowered his rifle, barrel smoking, and reloaded with a practiced motion. He met Threxer's gaze, his expression calm, almost cold. "Reality doesn't care what you mock," he said, his voice steady. "It only cares what works." Threxer bristled, scales flaring, but no retort came. He had no answer for the gaping wounds littering the deck, no denial for the corpses piled by human firepower. His silence was heavier than words, and it carried through the chamber like judgment. Commander Ruln clicked his mandibles again, more thoughtful this time. Perhaps the recoil is not weakness, but consequence. Force balanced by force. His many eyes reflected Marcus, studying him as though the human were a puzzle piece in a larger equation. The chamber settled into uneasy quiet. Alarms still pulsed, and the sound of distant skirmishes echoed from other sectors. The threat was far from over, but a shift had occurred. The coalition delegates no longer looked at the humans with laughter in their eyes. They looked with something sharper, more dangerous, respect laced with fear. Marcus slung his rifle, the weight familiar, the ache in his shoulder a companion rather than a burden. He gave a single order to his squad. Resupply. We're not finished. As his men moved to obey, the silence of the coalition lingered, each delegate forced to confront a truth they had spent years denying. Their weapons had been elegant, silent, and precise. Yet when faced with the raw brutality of survival, it was the deafening roar of recoil that had kept them alive. The lesson was only beginning. The battlefield stretched beyond the station walls, spilling onto the ash-gray plains that ringed the coalition outpost. Smoke rose in twisting columns where the first impacts of the HFY assault had struck, casting the horizon in a pall of fire and shadow. Alien armies scrambled into formation, their ranks bristling with plasma rifles and grav-sling cannons, voices raised in urgent orders that trembled with desperation. The XYRKL swarmed across the field like a tide of blades, their biomechanical warforms towering above their rank and file, each one a grotesque amalgam of armor, muscle, and machinery. Marcus Hale surveyed the chaos with the calm of a man who had lived too many battles to be shaken by noise. His Marines stood beside him, battered from the first skirmish yet unflinching, their weapons loaded, their shoulders sore from recoil but ready for more. He understood the rhythm of panic, how fear rippled through armies and hollowed their resolve. The coalition forces were unraveling already, confidence shattered by the futility of their elegant weapons. General Threxer bellowed from the command line, plasma cannon in his claws, directing his troops with guttural roars. He fought with ferocity, but every blast that struck the enemy bought only moments. The warbeasts at the XYRKL vanguard shrugged off the burning lances, their armor glowing before sealing over the wounds. Frustration carved new edges into Threxer's voice, yet he refused to look toward Marcus for help. Pride held him as firmly as any chain. The coalition line wavered. Plasma bursts flickered uselessly against chitin, gravity slings buckled under the sheer momentum of the charge. Panic was no longer a shadow. It was a flood. Soldiers stumbled backward, their firing growing erratic, their discipline collapsing with every monstrous step that closed the distance. Marcus knew the moment well. He had seen armies break. He also knew when to strike before the collapse became permanent. He raised his fist, a silent signal. His Marines shifted instantly, forming fire teams, their movements practiced into instinct. The rifles came up, heavy barrels leveled, and in the next heartbeat the plain erupted with a savage crack of gunfire. Each shot slammed against their shoulders, recoil hammering flesh and bone, yet they stood firm, channeling the force into disciplined bursts. Bullets tore into the warbeasts, gouging holes through armored plates, cracking limbs, tearing through the soft tissue beneath. Where plasma had scarred, steel annihilated. Alien commanders paused mid-order, their eyes drawn to the carnage the humans carved. Marcus's voice carried across the comm net, steady, clipped, every word a command forged in fire. Squad Alpha, suppression left. Bravo, stagger fire on the vanguard. Heavy gunners, knees and joints. Make them crawl. His Marines obeyed, without hesitation, their volleys coordinated, every recoil slammed shoulder bearing the cost of precision. The battlefield shifted under their will. Commander Ruln scuttled along the command dais, his many limbs quivering with agitation and fascination. His mandibles clicked, voice translating into the channel. They adapt through consequence. Recoil is feedback, a guide to stability. They harness what others discard. His compound eyes glowed with curiosity as he studied Marcus's squads. The XYRKL warbeasts faltered, their charge broken under the weight of kinetic fire. Some toppled in sprays of ichor, their regenerative armor unable to seal the cavernous wounds left by high-velocity rounds. Others staggered, limbs shattered by concentrated fire on their joints. The The coalition troops, seeing the impossible become possible, hesitated in disbelief. For the first time since the battle began, the enemy line slowed. Threxer's eyes burned with fury and something deeper, shame. His pride had withered in the face of undeniable truth, yet he clung to command. He shouted to his soldiers, forcing them to press alongside the humans, though his voice cracked beneath the weight of what he knew. His weapons had failed where crude projectiles triumphed. Marcus moved through the lines, his presence anchoring those who faltered. He adjusted stances with a touch, corrected aim with a word, reloaded without breaking stride. Every movement was efficient, a man whose body was memory made flesh. He felt the bruise deepening on his shoulder, the ache of each round fired, but it was a pain he embraced. Recoil was not weakness. It was the measure of power exchanged, proof that each bullet carried the weight of survival. The coalition soldiers began to mimic the humans, emboldened by the cover they provided. Their weapons still lacked the raw devastation, but under Marcus's direction they found renewed purpose. Plasma streams pinned enemies for human bullets to finish. Gravsling blasts staggered foes just long enough for Marines to hammer rounds into exposed gaps. For the first time, the disparate armies fought not as fragments, but as a single force, and at the center of it stood a quiet man with steel in his hands. The XYRKL did not retreat easily. Their shrieks carried across the plain as new monstrosities lumbered into view, hulking brutes clad in denser armor, plated in ridges that shimmered with unnatural resilience. Energy fire skittered harmlessly across their hides. Even the heavier coalition weapons faltered against their sheer bulk. The alien lines buckled once more, the fragile cohesion threatening to unravel. Marcus lifted his hand, signaling the heavy weapons team. 2 Marines dropped to their knees, assembling an anti-material rifle with practiced speed. The weapon was monstrous, each round nearly the size of a man's fist. When it fired, the recoil thundered like a cannon, the shooter bracing against the earth as if struck by a hammer. The bullet screamed across the plain and struck the lead brute. Its armor shattered, a hole wide enough for a man's torso erupting in its chest. The creature toppled, its regenerative tissue shredded beyond repair. A hush fell across the battlefield, even among the coalition's terrified ranks. They had seen beams fail, had watched precision weapons scatter harmlessly, but this was devastation incarnate. Threxer finally looked at Marcus, his expression dark, unreadable. His pride warred with his reason, but survival forced him to bow in action if not in words. "Human," he growled, "direct our fire. If your brutality holds the line, then I will follow it." Marcus gave no sign of triumph, no satisfaction at the concession. He simply nodded once. "Then keep your men steady. Fear won't save them. Fire will." As the next wave of XYRKL gathered, the coalition braced under human command. The thunder of rifles, the roar of cannons, the ache of recoil echoed across the plain. Each shot was a bargain struck with physics, each wound carved into the enemy a testament to survival through pain embraced. The battle was far from over, but the coalition no longer laughed at recoil. They felt its echo in their bones, a reminder that victory was not clean, not silent, and never without cost. And as the horizon darkened with the shapes of yet greater foes, Marcus Hale prepared his men to show the galaxy just how much humanity was willing to pay. The ground quaked as the XYRKL unleashed their final monstrosity. From the smoke emerged a colossus of living metal and pulsing flesh, a war form towering above the battlefield like a nightmare given shape. Its limbs were armored in overlapping plates that shimmered with sickly iridescence, and its eyes burned with the cruel intelligence of something bred to dominate entire worlds. Each step crushed the earth beneath it, sending tremors across the plain. The smaller XYRKL parted to make way, their shrieks rising in frenzied anticipation as though their god of war had come to finish what they could not. The coalition soldiers faltered at the sight, hope draining as fast as their courage. Plasma fire lashed out desperately, arcs of searing light striking the Titan's armored chest, yet it shrugged the attacks away as if brushed by wind. Grav-sling cannons hurled blasts of crushing force, but the creature braced itself, absorbing the momentum into its massive frame. Every attempt glanced off, leaving the Titan unscathed. Fear spread through the ranks like a contagion. Marcus Hale watched in silence, his jaw tight, eyes steady. He had expected this. War always escalated, always demanded more than the first volley could offer. Around him, his Marines readied weapons, shoulders bruised and bodies weary, but none asked if they could withstand what loomed before them. They already knew the answer. Marcus turned, voice calm yet sharp enough to cut through the din. That thing bleeds like the rest. We'll make it happen. General Threxer stood frozen, pride warring with dread. His plasma cannon hung heavy in his claws, its brilliance diminished to futility. The arrogance that once fueled his commands had drained away, replaced with something closer to desperation. Our weapons cannot pierce it, he admitted at last, his voice low, bitter. Even if we strike together, it will stand. Marcus shook his head. Not if we strike where it matters. Nothing's invincible. You just have to hit it hard enough, and often enough. He motioned to his squad, breaking them into fire teams, his gesture sharp, decisive. Alpha, target the legs. Bravo, suppress the flanks. Heavy gunners, center mass. Don't stop until it falls. The humans moved with precision, every motion drilled by countless battles. Their rifles barked in disciplined bursts, each round slamming into the Titan's joints and armor. The recoil battered their shoulders, teeth clenched against the repeated shock, but they leaned into it, harnessed it, made it part of their rhythm. The sound rolled across the battlefield, thunder layered upon thunder, every shot a defiance of the impossible. At first the Titan ignored them, striding forward, its claws carving trenches in the soil as it swatted aside alien troops like insects. But the Marines' fire began to bite. High-caliber rounds tore chips of armor from its legs, grinding its advance into a stagger. The anti-material rifle roared again, its recoil sending the gunner sprawling into the dirt even as the round punched deep into the creature's chest. The Titan shuddered, ichor spilling in thick black streams, the wound gaping wide where plasma had only scorched. Commander Ruln observed with unblinking eyes, mandibles clacking rapidly. His voice carried across the calm, reverent, and analytical at once. Every recoil is momentum spent, consequence embraced. Their weapons recoil because their force is real. Their pain is proof of power. His limbs twitched as if he could feel each shot echoing through his own frame. The Titan roared, a sound that rattled armor and bones alike, and surged forward in fury. Its claw swung down like a falling mountain, shattering the earth where Marcus had stood moments before. He rolled clear, came up to one knee, and fired point-blank into the exposed seam at the base of its arm. The round slammed through, the recoil bruising his shoulder deeper, but the joint cracked under the assault. The massive claw sagged, half-crippled.
Now!
Marcus shouted. His men unleashed a storm, every rifle, every cannon, every railgun pouring fire into the beast. Shoulders jolted, arms strained, but none wavered. They endured recoil not as punishment, but as covenant, proof that every ounce of force they delivered had been paid for in kind. Holes opened in the Titan's chest, its armor splitting wider with each barrage until the creature's insides spilled onto the earth in steaming rivers. The war colossus staggered, roared again, and then began to collapse. Its knees buckled, its torso split in half, and it fell with an earth-shaking crash that sent shockwaves rippling across the battlefield. Silence followed, stunned, heavy silence broken only by the hiss of cooling ichor. Coalition soldiers stared, their weapons limp in their hands. The Titan was dead. Not from plasma beams, not from grav-sling cannons, but from the relentless thunder of human firepower. The very weapons that had been mocked, ridiculed, dismissed as primitive had carved a hole so massive no arrogance could deny it. General Threxer approached the fallen beast, his scaled face twisted with conflicting emotions. He stared at the gaping wounds, the ragged holes punched clean through armor thicker than starship hulls. His voice, when it came, was subdued, almost reverent. "Your weapons recoil." He paused, his gaze shifting to Marcus. "And yet that is why they work." Marcus wiped the grime from his cheek, his expression unchanged. "Power always leaves a mark," he said simply. "If you don't feel it, you're not hitting hard enough." The words lingered in the air, heavier than the smoke drifting from the battlefield. Around them, coalition commanders exchanged uneasy glances, their laughter long dead, their pride ground into silence. They had seen what human recoil meant, not weakness, but the cost of strength. The Marines reloaded in silence, shoulders bruised, bodies sore, but eyes steady. Marcus gave a single nod to his men, the unspoken message clear. The war was not finished. The RECOIL would return, and when they did, humanity would be ready. As the coalition soldiers looked upon the ruin of the Titan and the ragged holes torn through its frame, a new respect and fear took root. The lesson was carved not in words, not in treaties, but in steel and blood. Humanity had shown its truth. They embraced the recoil, and in doing so, they wielded a force the galaxy had forgotten. And somewhere beyond the smoke, more shadows gathered, promising battles yet to come. The war was not over, but the galaxy would never again laugh at the thunder of a human weapon.